Have you ever felt invisible despite being constantly present? Like you're everywhere for everyone, yet somehow nowhere for yourself. There's a strange paradox at the heart of modern connection. The more available you make yourself, the less people seem to truly see you. What's always within reach loses its power. What never says no eventually loses its voice. And maybe the exhaustion you're carrying isn't from giving too little, but from giving yourself away without pause, without boundaries, without the sacred space to simply be. Carl Jung understood something most of us spend lifetimes avoiding, that the parts of ourselves we scatter across 1,000 demands are the very parts we need to reclaim if we ever want to feel whole again. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are beneath all the roles you've been performing. But before we go deeper into that journey, I want to invite you into something. If you're here because you're tired of feeling drained, if you're ready to explore what it means to truly reclaim your energy and presence, then subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every week we explore the psychology of transformation, the kind that doesn't just change how you think, but how you exist in the world. This isn't about quick fixes. It's about deep, lasting shifts in how you relate to yourself and others. You'll find more resources, reflections, and tools in the pinned comment and description below. Now let's continue. So let's talk about what happens when you stop being available. Not as an act of rebellion, not out of bitterness, but as a conscious choice to protect something sacred within you. Because the truth is, your constant availability isn't kindness. It's a pattern born from fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being unloved, fear that if you're not there, you won't matter. And that fear has turned you into someone who's always reachable, always explaining, always accommodating. But here's what no one tells you. The more you show up for everyone else, the more you disappear from your own life. Think about the last time someone took hours to reply to your message, or the person who only reaches out when they need something. How did that feel? Now think about yourself. How quickly do you respond? How often do you rearrange your day to fit someone else's need? How many times have you said yes when your entire body was screaming no? You've been trained to believe that love equals availability, that to be good means to always be accessible. But that's not love. That's self-abandonment dressed as virtue. Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted by the world. You built yours out of other people's expectations. You learned early that being helpful kept you safe, that being available made you worthy, that never disappointing anyone meant you'd never be abandoned. So you became the person who always answers, who always helps, who always understands. And somewhere along the way you forgot that beneath that mask is a human being with limits, with needs, with a soul that's been gasping for air. Your energy is not unlimited. Every time you respond to a message you don't want to answer, every time you defend yourself against baseless accusations, every time you try to fix someone else's chaos, you spend a piece of yourself. And like any resource, when it's depleted, you become fragile. Not because you're weak, but because there's nothing left. You can't pour from an empty cup, but you've been trying anyway, wondering why you feel hollow. Jung said that the psyche naturally seeks balance, that it knows when something is out of alignment. That whisper inside you, the one that says, "I'm so tired of this," isn't weakness. It's your soul trying to wake you up. It's the part of you that still remembers what peace feels like, what it's like to move through the world without carrying everyone else's expectations on your back. That whisper is the beginning of your return to yourself. Now imagine your energy as water. When you're constantly available, that water flows everywhere, into every crack, every demand, every crisis that isn't yours. It spreads so thin that nothing gets truly nourished, least of all you. But when you start to contain that water, when you choose where it flows, something miraculous happens. It deepens. It becomes still. And in that stillness, you can finally see your own reflection again. This is the power of strategic absence. Not cruelty, not coldness, but the conscious choice to stop feeding every fire that's lit in your direction. When you go silent, when you step back, the people who've been feeding off your reactions suddenly have nothing to consume. The ones who used your availability as proof of their importance start to panic. Because your silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the removal of their stage. And without you playing your role, their whole script falls apart. If this is resonating with you, if you're starting to see the patterns that have been draining you, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It tells me this kind of content matters to you, and it helps this message reach others who need to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Because we're going even deeper. Let's talk about what happens when you first start pulling back. At first it feels wrong. You'll feel guilty. You'll feel selfish. You'll hear voices in your head, maybe even voices from your past, telling you that you're being cold, that you're abandoning people, that you're not the person they thought you were. And you know what? They're right. You're not that person anymore, because that person was exhausted. That person was invisible. That person was so busy being everything for everyone that they forgot to be anything for themselves. Jung called this period sacred isolation. It's not loneliness. It's the space where you stop performing and start remembering. It's uncomfortable because you've been conditioned to equate your worth with your usefulness. The idea of just existing, without justifying your presence through constant service, feels alien. But this discomfort is necessary. It's the detox. You're withdrawing from the addiction to external validation. And like any withdrawal, it's painful before it's liberating. Here's what begins to happen in that silence. You start hearing yourself again. Not the voice that's been parroting what others need to hear, but your actual voice. The one that knows what you want, what you need, what you will and will not tolerate. You start noticing which relationships were built on reciprocity and which ones were built on your depletion. You see with painful clarity who respected your presence and who simply took advantage of your fear of rejection. And yes, you'll lose people. Some will walk away the moment you stop being convenient. Others will try to guilt you back into your old role, calling you distant or different. Let them. Because the people who truly value you won't punish you for having boundaries. They won't make you feel bad for protecting your peace. The right people will respect your absence because they understand that real connection doesn't require constant access. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming whole, always requires separation. You have to step away from the collective noise to find your own frequency. You have to walk through the discomfort of being misunderstood to reach the clarity of being authentic. This isn't about becoming isolated or cold. It's about becoming selective. It's about understanding that not every call deserves an answer, not every drama deserves your involvement, and not every person deserves unlimited access to your energy. Think of yourself as a temple. For too long you've left the doors wide open, letting anyone walk in, take what they want and leave. Some came with reverence, most came with entitlement, and you stood there welcoming them all because you thought that's what you were supposed to do. But temples aren't meant to be open to everyone all the time. There are sacred hours. There are rituals of entry. There's an understanding that what's inside is holy and must be protected. When you start closing those doors, even just a little, the energy inside begins to stabilize. You're no longer scattered across 1,000 places. You're gathered, whole-focused, and that focus changes everything. You stop reacting from a place of fear and start responding from a place of sovereignty. You stop explaining yourself to people who've already decided to misunderstand you. You stop defending your boundaries as if they need justification. Your peace becomes non-negotiable. Here's the shift. When you're no longer available to everyone, you finally become available to yourself. You start noticing what brings you joy, what drains you, what aligns with your truth, and what's just noise. You begin to build a life that reflects your values, not other people's expectations. And in that life, you're not invisible. You're undeniable. If you're feeling this shift happening inside you, if you're ready to start reclaiming your energy, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is give others permission to stop being everything for everyone. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one boundary you're ready to set today? Let's create a space where people can support each other in this process. Now let's get practical, because awareness without action is just more noise. Jung believed that real transformation happens when insight meets embodiment, when you take what you understand and make it real in your daily life. So here's your micro-action, the small but sacred steps you can take right now. First, identify one relationship or situation where you've been overfunctioning. It could be a friend who only calls when they need something, a family member who expects you to fix their problems, or even a work dynamic where you're constantly going beyond what's required without recognition. Write it down, name it, because what's unnamed stays in the shadows, and what stays in the shadows controls you. Second, practice the pause. The next time that person reaches out, or that situation demands your immediate response, stop. Take a breath. Ask yourself, is this mine to carry? Does this deserve my energy right now? Am I responding out of genuine care or out of fear of disappointing someone? Give yourself permission to wait. You don't owe anyone an instant reply. Your thoughtfulness is not a character flaw. Third, create a simple boundary statement. It doesn't have to be harsh or complicated. Something like, I need some time before I can respond to this, or I'm not available to help with that right now. Or even just, I'll get back to you when I can. Practice saying it out loud. Let your nervous system hear your own voice claiming space. Because boundaries aren't built in one grand moment. They're built in 100 small ones, each time you choose yourself over the discomfort of someone else's disappointment. And here's your measure of progress. Notice how you feel after you set that boundary. Not how the other person reacts, but how you feel. There might be guilt at first. There might be anxiety. But underneath that, if you're quiet enough, you'll feel something else, relief, a sense of spaciousness, the first breath of freedom. That's your soul telling you you're on the right path. Remember, this isn't about becoming unavailable to everyone forever. It's about becoming intentional. It's about moving from a place of compulsive giving to conscious choosing. Some people deserve your full presence. Some situations require your engagement. But you get to decide which ones. And that decision, that sovereignty, is what transforms your life. Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you can't become yourself while you're busy being everyone else's solution, everyone else's comfort, everyone else's emotional crutch. The person you're meant to be is waiting in the silence, in the space you create when you stop filling every gap with your presence. So close the door, not forever, not out of anger, but long enough to hear your own heartbeat again, long enough to remember what your voice sounds like when it's not performing for an audience, long enough to feel the weight lift, the clarity return, the peace settle in. Let the world wonder where you went. Let them sit with your absence and realize, perhaps for the first time, what your presence was actually worth. Because here's the truth they don't want you to know. When you stop being available, people don't forget you. They remember you. When you stop explaining, you reclaim your mystery. When you stop performing, you reveal your power. When you stop being everywhere, you finally become someone. Not someone they can use, but someone they respect. Not someone they take for granted, but someone whose presence feels like a gift, not a given. And in that transformation, you don't lose your capacity to love or connect or give. You refine it. You direct it toward what truly matters. You stop wasting your light on people who want to keep you dim. You stop offering your depth to those who only want your surface. You become selective, discerning, intentional. And that selectivity isn't cruelty. It's wisdom. This is the hidden teaching of unavailability. It's not about closing your heart. It's about opening it to yourself first. It's not about rejecting others. It's about no longer rejecting yourself in service of their comfort. It's not about building walls. It's about building a home inside yourself that you actually want to live in. As we close, I want to leave you with this. Your absence is not a punishment. It's a reclamation. Every time you choose silence over reaction, stillness over chaos, solitude over shallow connection, you're not disappearing from life. You're reappearing to yourself. And that self, the one that's been buried under years of people-pleasing and fear-driven availability, is worth every uncomfortable moment of the journey back. If this video has shifted something in you, save it to a playlist. Come back to it when you need the reminder that your energy is sacred, that your boundaries are holy, and that your peace is worth protecting. Leave a comment sharing one thing you're going to stop being available for. Let's build a community of people who understand that true strength isn't found in endless giving, but in conscious, boundaried presence. When you stop being available, your life doesn't just change, it begins. Because for the first time, you're not living someone else's version of who you should be. You're living as yourself, whole, sovereign, free. And that version of you, the one who knows when to show up and when to step back, the one who protects their energy like the sacred resource it is, that version of you doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Your silence speaks. Your absence teaches. Your boundaries heal. And in the quiet space you create, in the stillness you've been too afraid to enter, you'll find what you've been searching for all along. Yourself, waiting patiently, ready to be remembered, ready to be honored, ready to finally come home. But let's go deeper into what this transformation actually looks like in the architecture of your psyche. Jung understood that the self isn't something you create from scratch. It's something you uncover layer by layer, by removing what was never yours to begin with. The expectations, the inherited beliefs, the fear-based patterns that turned you into a servant of other people's comfort. When you reclaim your unavailability, you're not building a new personality. You're excavating your original one, the one that existed before the world taught you to shrink. Think about the garden metaphor for a moment. Your inner landscape is like a piece of land that's been neglected because you've been too busy tending to everyone else's soil. Weeds have grown where flowers should be. The ground has hardened because nothing sacred has been planted there in years. But the moment you withdraw your energy from external demands, the moment you stop scattering seeds in other people's gardens, you finally have the resources to cultivate your own. And what grows there isn't just peace. It's clarity, it's purpose. It's the distinct sense of knowing who you are when no one's watching. This is what Jung meant by the integration of the shadow. The shadow isn't just your dark impulses or hidden flaws. It's everything you've repressed to maintain your persona, your mask of constant availability. It's the anger you swallowed to keep the peace. It's the boundaries you never set because you were afraid of being called selfish. It's the desires you buried because they didn't fit the image of the helpful, selfless person you thought you had to be. When you stop being available, you create space for that shadow material to surface. And yes, it's uncomfortable. You might discover that you're angrier than you thought. You might realize you resent people you've been serving for years. You might find that underneath all that giving was a deep, aching need to be seen as indispensable because you didn't believe you were valuable on your own. But here's the gift. Once you see it, you can work with it. You can take that anger and transmute it into boundaries. You can take that resentment and let it show you where you've been betraying yourself. You can take that need for validation and slowly, gently redirect it inward, learning to validate yourself through your own choices, your own standards, your own sense of what feels right. This is the alchemical process Jung spoke of. Lead into gold, pain into wisdom, compulsion into choice. Now let's talk about projection, because this is where things get really interesting. When you've been overly available for a long time, you attract people who need that from you. It's not a coincidence. It's an energetic exchange. You're projecting, I need to be needed to feel worthy. And they're projecting, I need someone to fix me, carry me, save me. And those two projections lock together like puzzle pieces. The relationship feels intense, feels important, but it's not actually intimate. It's codependent. True intimacy requires two whole people choosing to connect, not two half people trying to complete each other through constant availability and constant need. When you start withdrawing, when you start protecting your energy, those projection dynamics collapse. The people who were only there because of what you could do for them will leave. And that's not a loss. That's a liberation. Because now you have space for something real. Now you can attract people who meet you as equals, who respect your time and your boundaries, who don't need you to be constantly available because they're secure enough in themselves. These relationships feel different. They feel lighter. There's breathing room. There's trust. There's reciprocity. And for the first time, you realize that connection doesn't have to cost you your peace. Jung also spoke about synchronicity, the meaningful coincidences that occur when you're aligned with your true self. When you're scattered and over-available, you miss these moments. You're too busy reacting, too busy managing other people's emotions, too busy keeping up appearances. But when you create space, when you step back into your own rhythm, you start noticing the signs, the opportunities that appear just when you need them. The conversations that shift everything, the people who show up at exactly the right time. It's not magic. It's alignment. When your energy is contained and directed, when you're not leaking yourself into 1,000 irrelevant places, you become magnetic to what's actually meant for you. And here's something most people don't realize. Your unavailability doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. When you're constantly available, you define yourself through your usefulness. Your identity becomes, I'm the person who helps. I'm the person who's always there. I'm the person who never lets anyone down. But what happens when you're no longer doing that? Who are you when you're not performing that role? At first, it's terrifying. It feels like an identity crisis. But that disorientation is necessary, because on the other side of it is something far more stable, a sense of self that isn't dependent on external validation. An identity rooted not in what you do for others, but in who you are when you're alone with yourself. This is the journey of individuation in its purest form. You're separating from the collective, from the mass of expectations and obligations, to find your singular voice. And yes, it's lonely at times. Yes, it's misunderstood. But it's also the only path to genuine wholeness. Because you can't be whole while you're fragmented across 1,000 demands. You can't know yourself while you're constantly performing for others. You can't hear your own truth while you're drowning in everyone else's noise. So as we bring this full circle, I want you to consider, what would your life look like if you stopped measuring your worth by how available you are? What would change if you started honoring your energy as sacred? If you treated your time and attention as the finite resources they actually are? What relationships would shift? What opportunities would open? What version of yourself would emerge from the quiet? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're invitations. Invitations to step into a different way of being, one where your presence is a choice, not an obligation. Where your silence is respected, not questioned. Where your boundaries are honored, not negotiated. This is the life that's waiting for you on the other side of constant availability. A life where you're not invisible despite being everywhere. A life where you're seen, valued, and respected, precisely because you're selective about where you show up. And when you finally claim that life, when you finally choose yourself with the same dedication you've been choosing everyone else, something shifts in the fabric of your existence. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop proving. You simply are. And in that state of being rooted and whole and unapologetically yourself, you discover what Jung knew all along, that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. Not who they need you to be, not who you think you should be, but who you are beneath all the masks, all the performances, all the exhausting availability that never served you anyway. So take the step, close the door, reclaim your energy, protect your peace, and watch as your life transforms from a performance into a living, breathing expression of your truest self. Because when you stop being available to everyone, you finally become present to the one person who's been waiting for you all along, yourself. There's one more layer to this we need to explore, and it's perhaps the most liberating insight Jung ever offered, the concept of psychological sovereignty. This isn't just about setting boundaries or saying no more often. It's about recognizing that you are the sole authority over your inner world. No one else gets to determine your worth. No one else gets to define your pace. No one else gets to decide what deserves space in your consciousness. This sovereignty is your birthright, but it's one you have to claim consciously, deliberately every single day. Think about how you've been living. How many of your daily choices are actually yours? How many of your reactions are automatic responses programmed by years of conditioning? When someone asks for your time, do you check in with yourself first, or do you say yes out of habit? When criticism comes your way, do you pause to assess its validity, or do you immediately internalize it as truth? These patterns reveal where you've surrendered your sovereignty. Every automatic yes, every unexamined reaction, every moment you prioritize someone else's comfort over your own truth is a moment you've handed your power away. But sovereignty isn't something you achieve once and possess forever. It's a practice. It's a daily recommitment to yourself. It's waking up each morning and deciding who gets access to your energy that day. It's pausing before you respond to that text, before you agree to that favor, before you explain yourself to someone who's already decided to misunderstand you. It's asking yourself again and again, does this serve my highest good? Does this align with who I'm becoming? Is this where I want to invest my finite energy today? Jung spoke about the transcendent function, the psyche's natural ability to hold opposites in tension until a third way emerges. And this is exactly what happens when you practice unavailability with consciousness. You're holding two truths simultaneously. I care about others and I care about myself. I want to be helpful and I want to protect my peace. I value connection and I value solitude. These aren't contradictions. They're paradoxes that, when held with awareness, create a more integrated way of being. You don't have to choose between being loving and being boundaried. You can be both. In fact, you must be both if you want to show up in the world as someone whole rather than someone depleted. Here's what starts happening when you live from this place of sovereignty. Your relationships become clearer. The people who truly care about you appreciate your boundaries because they want you to thrive, not just serve. The ones who resist your unavailability reveal themselves for what they are. People more interested in what you can do for them than in who you actually are. And that revelation Painful as it might be is a gift, because now you know. Now you can choose with open eyes. You're no longer operating from illusion or obligation. You're operating from clarity. Your work changes too. When you stop over-functioning, when you stop being the person who always picks up the slack, something interesting happens. Either the systems adapt and become more balanced, or you realize you've been propping up dysfunction that was never yours to fix. Either way, you win. You reclaim hours of your life. You redirect energy that was being wasted on tasks that didn't truly need you. You discover that the world doesn't collapse when you step back. In fact, it often improves because your withdrawal creates space for others to step up, to take responsibility, to grow in ways they never would have if you'd kept rescuing them. Even your relationship with yourself transforms. You start hearing your inner voice more clearly because there's less external noise drowning it out. You begin to trust your instincts again because you're giving them room to speak. You rediscover desires and dreams that got buried under years of putting everyone else first. And slowly, carefully, you start building a life that actually reflects who you are, not who you've been performing to be. But I want to be honest with you about something. This path isn't always comfortable. There will be moments when you question yourself, moments when the guilt feels overwhelming, moments when you wonder if you're being too harsh, too selfish, too distant. These moments are part of the process. They're the old programming, trying to pull you back into familiar patterns. And in those moments you have to remember, discomfort isn't the same as being wrong. Growth always feels strange at first because you're inhabiting a new way of being. You're like a plant that's been growing in the shade, finally turning toward the sun. The light feels intense because you're not used to it, but that doesn't mean you should go back to the darkness. Jung called this the process of becoming conscious. And consciousness, real consciousness, requires you to see yourself clearly, including the parts that are uncomfortable to acknowledge,